Hey everybody, welcome to Catch Up Conversation. Today I have somebody who's very special, somebody who's been a personal mentor and an influencer to me. Although I don't think he quite knows it, I think I would have caught up with the person I'm going to introduce you maybe 4 or 5 times at the most in a face-to-face situation. But we've developed a strong bond, and he's been somebody who's influenced me. He is somebody who's traveled 70 countries, professional speaker. He distributes inspiration. He's a distributor of encouragement. That's what I'd like to call him. He's an author. He's written 4 books actually, and he's contributed 3 books and contributed to one. Some of the books that he's written is The American Dream from an Indian Heart, Abstracts to Absolutes. He's the contributing author to Top Performance, written by the legendary Zig Ziglar. His latest book, Hard-Headed and Soft-Hearted, is co-authored with Rick Beluzzo, the former president of Microsoft. So I can keep talking a lot, but I want you to hear him speak. So ladies and gentlemen, excited to introduce Krish Dhanam, but I must say this before I introduce him. He likes to be known as Anila's husband and Nick's dad, right? So Krish, such a pleasure to have you.
Well, yeah, the connection is not.
Yeah, excited.
Well, thanks a lot, Rajiv. For some reason, the connection is not cooperating, and I apologize for that.
No
it's one of those rare scenarios where who does an Indian call for tech support? I'm about the least technical person there is.
Right. Right.
So sometimes I find these things, when they work like a charm, and when they don't, they create all kinds of headaches.
Absolutely.
But thanks for that most generous introduction, and the feeling is mutual. I do admire the work you have done, and admire your courage, and take great solace from your own journey and some of the fights you've had familially, and how you have articulated and overcome them. So good to be with you.
Thanks, Krish. So Krish, small town, I don't think it's fair to call it small town any longer. Vizag. Vizag is where you grew up. So can you share how Vizag actually shaped you?
Vizag had a great school system. My parents came from some amount of influence in terms of who they were by other people knowing them. So the boundaries of what you could and could not do were set very early on. The city itself had mountains on one side, the ocean on the other. So if you had to create mischief or destroy, you had to leave.
Right.
So it is a city of destiny, and we still have a piece of home there and a lot of my heart. But it shaped the early years because of, just had a great childhood. It was a warm, loving place, and Vizag was quite different from the rest of India, even in those days, with the expat influence and all that by the refineries and the fertilizer factories. So we were introduced to a world that was outside geography of India, even when we were very young. So most of us were fairly ambitious.
Awesome. And from there, you kind of went to IMT Ghaziabad. And I think when you went to IMT Ghaziabad, must have been what, 82? 82 is when you would have gone to IMT Ghaziabad. And
yeah, must have been, in fact, it's the word I don't use anymore, which we do a lot of in India, is people say when I passed out. I passed out a lot. I passed out a lot when I was in Ghaziabad, right, and in my BCom days, but that had nothing to do with graduation. But yeah, right. 82, I finished my BCom and graduated and went to IMT because it was the only place that would have me. I did not have the academic qualifications or the intellectual smarts to get into any of those places that required an entrance test. IMT was the only MBA program at that time that had a group discussion to enter, and I knew I'd get in.
Awesome. But I'm guessing you could have felt initially like a fish out of water, from the south straight into the epicenter of the north, if you may.
Yeah, because the perceptions ran different, and even though I live in the south in the US and we have the perception of south and north here, we do that in India as well. Right. My roommate was a Sardarji by the name of Naininder, who was a really cool guy. And I was suddenly paired with him as a roommate. So I'm a South Indian guy wearing a lungi, and he's a North Indian Punjabi comes from a very sophisticated agrarian background.
Right.
And one day he walked in and saw me wearing a lungi, and he used to call me Kalu. He says, "Abe o Kalu, ye lungi wungi nahi chalega. Agar yahan sona hai to pajama jaake silwao." So I had to, by urgency, I had to go and have a pair of pajamas stitched in Ghaziabad. And I wore pajamas since. I've never worn a lungi. But so those were the early indoctrination days of discovering a world that was alien to you, but manufacturing the courage to navigate and befriend those people with friendships that have now lasted 40 years.
Awesome. That's so good. A little birdie tells me that you just didn't get your MBA alone in Ghaziabad. You got something which has lasted for a lifetime, right?
Yeah, I mean, the most unromantic proposal in history was when I met my bride. I saw her standing in line registering for classes, and I changed my line. I had no idea what I wanted in life, but I wanted to be in line for that. You work for consultancy companies, and you're a little more technically adept than I am. But I tell the youngsters today, when you guys were growing up, or when you guys grow up, you can do everything online. अगर line मारना है, also they do online. हम लोग तो खड़े होके line मारना था, and if you didn't succeed, the next day was the walk of shame. You had to go back by them.
Right.
But I walked up to Anila very confidently in 1982, right after I met her, and I said, "Will you marry me?" Within the first couple of times I met her, I asked her, "Will you marry me?" And she thought I was a creep. And it was one of those things that I was just persistent, because I knew. I don't know much in this world, but I did know then that that woman would change my life, and I pursued it vigorously. And jokingly, I tell people, in December of 1983, she said yes. I said, "Yes, what?" I had forgotten the question. So, this year we finished 34 years together.
Wow, that's amazing! Congratulations. Right. So your next phase, okay? So Vizag, Ghaziabad. Your next phase, 1986, is New York, and you are in New York with a princely sum of $9. 1984, 1986. So I said Vizag, Ghaziabad. Then you are in New York with a
86. You're right.
86. Princely sum of $9. How did you go about life with $9 in United States of America?
Well, 9 is what I had, because that's what I was allowed to leave India with 20, because Anila was born here but raised in India. So I came on what is called a 1R1. I had a work permit the day I landed. And I'm not 22 days after I landed in America, I got my first job, and I've not been unemployed since. I've always moved from one thing to another. But they gave me $20 as an immigrant to the US, and that's what I was allowed to take. And I spent 11 in Frankfurt. I arrived in New York, had 9. Anila was informed that she was laid off from her job. And so when we landed in Dallas, she had a severance check, went on unemployment insurance. And, I tell people, necessity is, we've heard the adage that necessity is the mother of invention, but it also makes it the architect of learning. You have to draw up some blueprints for the foundation that is going to be your new building. Right. So I very quickly realized that you can live on less if you have to. So that's how we began. We just, Mr. Ziglar would often say, when you come to the end of your financial rope, despair will make you stretch your hand out. Hope will make you tie a knot and hang on.
That's true. So well put. So well put. Okay, and then
so we tied a knot and hung on, and I carried bologna sandwiches to work, and we scraped the bottom for a while, and then God takes care of the rest.
Awesome. That's so good to hear. So then you win this almost divinely orchestrated sales contest, which gets you a free pass for a seminar. You earned it. I shouldn't say a free pass. You earned this seminar ticket where Mr. Zig Ziglar was actually doing a session. What happened there within you?
Yeah, January 26, 1990 was the date. I remember it because January 26 is Republic Day in India. And I won a sales contest, and instead of giving me the prize money that goes with it, my boss says, "I see in you potential that is untapped. You're achieving what targets are put in front of you, but I want to send to a man who will make you an overachiever. I never understood the concept of overachievement. When I grew up in India, achievement was tied to intelligence, which I was quickly told I had none of. I jokingly tell people if I had a middle name, it probably would be Damn It, because anytime they call me, they would say, damn it. So I ended up believing for the first time, January 26, 1990, that I could achieve more than what I was achieving. And it took effort. So I went into the seminar as a person who was seeking. And I often told people the story that day something happened. I got lost. I got turned around. I went to the wrong end of town. But Mr. Ziglar later on said that was the day I was found. He says 1,500 people came to the seminar, and everybody who took a right to get into the venue took a left to exit back on the freeway. Something radically happened in those 3 hours that changed my perception. And the one principle I teach out of that day is this. That evening, Mr. Ziglar taught me how to challenge every assumption I've ever held dear that were either cultural or traditional. And from that day, Rajiv, and you've met me, and we've had many the 5 or 6 conversations we've had deep conversations. You will attest to this fact that if you've ever seen a contrarian, it's me. I'm the opposite of everything that most people would do in what I do, because that was challenging assumptions. When I go and speak, I tell people when I start, I said, listen, the applause you gave me when I was introduced was mandatory. Whatever you give me when I finish could be paid, and I'll just try to earn your pity. So nice. I don't go out to set records. I don't go out to break records, but I go out to be a benchmark. I don't want to be remembered as someone who gave a good speech. I want to be remembered as someone who altered a life. And so I don't pander to 1,500. I pander to one, just like he did.
Awesome. That's awesome. So you join the Ziglar Corporation. You join them as a telemarketer, and you have this incredible journey within the organization and reach the position of vice president. How many years did it take, Krish, and how did you make that journey?
Yeah, I was what you call a 12-year overnight success.
Okay.
And the principle is the same, for those of your friends and your colleagues who are watching this conversation, and that's all it is. The principle of going from a telemarketer to a vice president is not about ascent, but it is about understanding that some people play a short-term game and they have short-term reward. Short-term, what happens is you get short-term rewards. Long-term requires voluntary change. You have to submit yourself to the process. So I went in not expecting the promotion, not demanding it, not believing I deserved it, but changing everything I could do. So one day when I arrived, it would be because everybody else behind me pushed me there. Mm-hmm. The principle is when you want to rise, don't look at the content of what you need to deliver to get there. Impact the people behind you and change their lives. So by just buoyancy, you bring enough people from where they are to where you are, and they'll take you on their shoulders.
Right. That's awesome. So Krish, in terms of your gifts, right? I mean, it's so obvious. I mean, you speak so powerfully, and it's not just words of motivation, right? But it's words that actually stir you within to take action. But this gift of talking, this gift of speaking, and the decision to pursue it as a career, was it something that you realized back in Vizag? And when did it actually happen? Or was it the Ziglar exposure which caused you to say, hey, maybe I should be doing this all the time?
Yeah, in Vizag, it came about by accident because the principal of the college, Dr. Panibhushan Rao, who is the principal of Balaya College, one day called me into his office and said, you're fit for nothing. You never go to class. You always sit in the canteen. You're smoking cigarettes. You're useless. I know your father. He's a good man, and you're disappointing him. And I said, well, I did not need you to remind me of that. He does that every day. Then Panibhushan Rao said something very interesting. He said, there's a debate in Ankappally. It's being organized by the YMCA. You talk a lot. Why don't you go and talk there and see if you can do some good with your talking? And I'll never forget that day. I took a bus ride. I went to this debate in Ankappally, which was about 30 kilometers away. And back then it was an hour ride. Now it'll probably take you 3 days. But when I got there, I'm not kidding you, I had a cigarette in my mouth. I walked up to the organizer and said, I represent Balaya College, and apparently you have a debate here. And my principal entered me. I said, can you tell me what the topic is? And the topic was something that was going on at that time about the introduction of Doordarshan by limited, some big topic. I said, who's your previous winner? And they pointed him across the room. I said, is he for the topic or against? They said, he's for the topic. I said, put me down against. And that was the journey. Literally, I won that debate and I came home and I won 19 more debates after that, intercollegiate, gold medal, all of that nonsense. But the reason was I had the ability to think on my feet. And this man saw that in me. Many years later, when my book was released in Vizag, he came to felicitate me and he put a shawl around my neck. And he basically, jokingly said, he said, see, if you had ignored me and not gone to that first debate. And I do think that's where it began. But Mr. Ziglar put a different spin on it. He did not put it to be argumentative, which is what my entire gift of gab was always about proving myself smarter than other people by twisting words and playing verbal gymnastics. But Mr. Ziglar said, listen, public speaking is a privilege. But if you internalize what you believe and you personalize why you believe it, when you vocalize, others will believe it. And for the first time in my life, I was given hope. A hope that my gift could change lives. I didn't realize that now I'm proud. I'm grateful for the emails I get from across the globe, from far off places of saying, you know what, the simplicity with which you talk has stirred my heart. So those were his words. He says, you internalize what you believe and you personalize why you believe it, and you'll impact others. You'll be able to vocalize so others will believe.
Oh, that's awesome.
So,
Krish, I think
you there?
Yeah, I'm there. I just lost your video for a second.
Okay.
Yeah, so you can hear me, right?
Yeah. All right.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so then you make this decision to do it 24/7, right? Do it as a full-time, as a professional speaker, traveling different countries. That must have been a bold decision. May have been a little scary because you're going to be on your own. How did it feel, and what did you do?
Well, I've been in sales for a long time, and I've started off as a sales trainer. But like everything, I always have a humorous representation for some of the more poignant moments in life. I jokingly say, those that can do, those that can teach, and those that can't teach become sales trainers. So, other people were good at what they were doing. Other people were good at how they did it. I was successful, but being a contrarian, I didn't want to do something full time. I don't do this to feed my ego, because more importantly for me is to feed my family. But I did it on a desire to be able to do something more, I guess. So I never stopped selling. I still do. I never stopped serving. I still do. I never stopped writing. By God's grace or by his pity, I don't know which one it is, he allowed me to make a handsome career at it and be an in-demand speaker doing about 120 events a year. But I think most of it began just on, hey, let's add something else. I remember a story of an insurance man who was selling $5,000 policies back in the 50s. And then one day he said, what if I add a zero? And he started selling 50,000. So my goal to do what I do just began usually as a whim, not with what is there. I've always believed in what else is there.
Right. That's awesome. So this whole thing about how do you take a talent and make it a gift? What would you say? How do you convert a talent into a gift?
Well, that's a great question, and you've done it remarkably well. You felt you had the talent, and the primary thing is talent is from God. Strength is man manifested. Most people will go to their grave with their finest talent within them because they hung around the wrong man pool. And sometimes if you want your talent to be projected, you have to make it a strength yourself, because if you rely on the strength of man, they will actually bring you down. So when you are with a TCS or you have a high position like you did, and you're a consultant and you have the job everybody else wants, and I'm VP of Ziglar and I'm now living the dream, and one day you make a decision that you want something else, everybody is going to say, take the security, take the dental benefit and the mental benefit. Kyun bekar mein, ragar raha hai, my father would always say, for him, my father's security was a government job. And suddenly to tell my dad, I'm going to go into sales. And he says, what do you mean sales? I said, well, I'm going to go speak for a living. He says, you mean people will pay you to speak? I said, I don't know yet, I hope. So it's that whole conversation with ourselves, all of us in our mind are legends. And, but I remember Mr. Ziglar saying, unless you believe that people are going to roll in the aisles with laughter and stand and applaud when you finish, don't even start. Everything else will think, but I've had the privilege. I got a standing ovation with 35,000 people at the Georgia Dome, and then some people laughed with me, and then many have laughed at me. So either way, it works out. But the belief of your strength, that God-given talent, and I do believe that I had the gift. But by the same token, I want to add a caveat. Success is going to where success is, and hoping by sheer centripetal force you're sucked in. So whenever you feel you have the talent and you want to exercise it, go to where you think it's being utilized and being effectively demonstrated, even though you don't belong. So the principle I teach here is believe you belong. So I went to the most unorthodox places like the prisons of the US and tried to motivate inmates, driving 60 miles one way. These are all challenging things to do. But once you do that, corporate America becomes a breeze. The corporate world becomes a breeze. So the talent component does exist, but you have to walk away from the people who are not allowing you to make it a strength as well.
Right. That's awesome. That's a great takeaway. So, Krish, let me ask you, do you get nervous now, even if you have to make a speech? Do you still get nervous?
I still do, because it's brought on. I still wake up at 4 o'clock. You know that. In fact, I wake up most days at 5 o'clock. But when this contagion started, I started at 4, because I don't want to come through this as someone who created an identity. I think on Sunday I made this statement, and I don't know if I'll make it correctly again. But the statement is this: mediocre people are behind the curve. Miserable people want to flatten the curve. Motivated people want to be ahead of the curve.
Oh, that's a good one.
And so I force nervousness on myself, because then I stop dying. I'm still excited.
That's awesome.
So nervousness that you force has to come by discipline that knocks you off balance. So if you wake up at 5 and you force yourself to wake up at 4, that discipline is uncomfortable. It'll knock you off balance. So in these days, I still force myself every time to get nervous by new ways that would knock me off balance, because I want to be ahead of the curve.
Right. And how do you prepare for a speech? What goes to making a speech for you?
Well, until my dog died, she was the biggest audience, either the most confused or the wisest dog on the planet. But she would sit there and I would bounce ideas off the dog and say, so what do you think? And she'd kind of look at me like, you're as crazy as most people at 5 in the morning. But I talk my thoughts out aloud. I read always in 3 different trajectories. When I read something that is informational, I first find out what the author is saying to me. Then I would underline what I think the author wants me to do to change in order to believe what I just read. And then I rewrite it saying, how would I say this with some kind of authorial intent myself? That's my internalizing, personalizing, and vocalizing the profound thought that I'm bringing in.
Right. That's awesome. Awesome. So, Krish, just trying to see how the network holds up right now.
That outline, it allows me to sleep fast. I realized apparently when I speak.
Right.
So
let me ask you one last question. The last question is this, right? We're living in we don't know what the post-COVID world is going to look like. So especially for those who are looking at their careers and looking at the uncertainty, what would you tell them? What should they be doing to kind of prepare for this uncertainty, unknown? We don't know what the new world is going to look like? What would you tell them?
I think they should, gratefully, I started this about 4 years ago when I created a statement for myself because I was traveling more than I should have and all of the other stuff in my life changed. I spent 6 months of the year doing work for my foundation. So 6 months of the year is all I have to achieve my financial goals. So I wrote a statement at that time saying, let your streams of imagination only be exceeded by your streams of income. The one bit of advice I would give is have at least 3 or 4 different ways to earn a living. And what that will do is allow you at least 2 ways to shape a life. So if you have to dig a ditch, dig a ditch. The statement that Mr. Ziglar made to me many years ago, and he's been my gold standard, he says, always prepare yourself to be the kind of person where there's no job too small that you think it's beneath you, and there's no job too big where you think you're overqualified.
Wow. That's awesome. That's really awesome. So Krish, there's so much to take from this conversation. I know the network has been a little patchy, but we could hear you clearly. I'm certain that many who listen to this are going to be blessed and maybe even challenged and motivated, especially in the times that we find ourselves in. I want to personally thank you for taking time off. You've never said no to me. That's something you need to realize. Every time I've asked you something, you've always said yes. Whether it was writing a foreword for my book, whether it was a meeting despite your busy schedule when you hop into Mumbai, and now this. So grateful for this. Thank you so much, Krish, for who you are and what you mean.
No problem.
To many people like me.
Yeah, appreciate it, and keep up the good work, Rajiv. You're doing great work, and I'm privileged to call you a friend. And again, I apologize for the connection, but I think if the audio is clear, then what we can do is Zoom allows an audio recording as well, and maybe that can be the benefit. But sure. When the IT people come back, let's do this again.
We'll do this. Thanks, Krish. God bless.
All righty.
Stay safe. Bye.
God bless. Bye-bye.